In the autumn of 1685, a small group of American settlers disembarked from their wooden ship, weary from their long journey, but filled with hope and dreams of a new beginning. The vast wilderness before them was both imposing and enchanting. It was to be the canvas upon which they'd paint their future. At the forefront of this group was Captain James Ward. Standing well over 6 feet, his imposing figure was accentuated by his military posture. His blue eyes, sharp and assessing, missed nothing, having witnessed both the beauty and horrors of the world. Time and the elements had etched lines onto his sun-tanned face, telling tales of countless sea voyages and battles. His thick brown hair, streaked with hints of gray, was pulled back into a practical ponytail, a testament to his no-nonsense attitude. Close to him, almost as if drawing strength from his presence, was his graceful sister, Amelia. A stark contrast to her elder brother, her delicate frame was reminiscent of the elegant willows by their old home. Her raven black hair cascaded down her back, and her expressive green eyes held a mix of wonder and caution as she surveyed their new surroundings. Amelia was a beacon of gentleness amidst the rugged backdrop, her mere presence bringing a semblance of calm to the group. A short distance away, Samuel, with his stout build and rough hands, discussed plans for farming and building. His life had been one of toil, and his physique bore testimony to it. By his side, his wife Mary, with her sharp features and even sharper intuition, listened intently. She often acted as Samuel's compass, guiding him when he was lost in his thoughts. Her slender fingers frequently adjusted the shawl around her shoulders, betraying her apprehension. Then there was Benjamin, a lad of no more than 17, often seen at the fringes of the group. His fiery red hair made him stand out, and he wore it with a quiet pride. While his voice was seldom heard, his eyes spoke volumes. They held the dreams of youth, yet, having faced the hardships of the voyage, also carried the weight of experience. The vast expanse of the untouched forest that lay before them seemed to beckon, its mysteries hidden beneath the dense foliage. Towering trees with their massive branches obscured the sunlight, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the forest floor. Adding to the surreal beauty was a thin veil of mist that wafted through the trees. It gave the woods an otherworldly charm, as though the boundaries between the mundane and the magical were blurred. Little did the settlers know that this seemingly tranquil land held secrets that would challenge the very core of their beliefs and their will to survive. With each passing day, as the settlers ventured further into the embrace of the dense forest to establish their initial settlement, the woods seemed to come alive with a consciousness of their own. Towering ancient trees with their gnarled roots and branches seemed to watch over them, silent witnesses to the intrusion of man in their age-old dominion. By day, the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of unseen creatures was all that broke the stillness. However, as dusk fell and shadows grew long, an uncanny silence would settle, only to be broken by whispers that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the woods. These were no ordinary sounds. They were elusive, like fragments of old songs or laments from forgotten souls. Amelia, with her sensitive disposition, often found herself drawn to these voices. Lying in her makeshift tent, she would strain her ears to catch the faint, ethereal murmurs. They sounded mournful, as if recounting tales of times long gone. These nocturnal serenades both fascinated and unnerved her. One evening, as the last rays of the sun vanished, she confided in Samuel. "Do you hear them too? The voices that float with the wind?" she questioned, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel, ever the pragmatist, chuckled softly. "It's just the forest, Amelia. The wind, the animals, the rustling of leaves," he reasoned, dismissing her concerns. But even as he spoke, he cast a wary glance towards the trees, as if expecting them to confirm or deny his words. Mary, on the other hand, seemed deeply affected. While she said little, her actions spoke volumes. Each evening, as the voices grew more pronounced, she would clutch her crucifix, her knuckles white with tension. Her lips would move in silent prayer, and her eyes, wide and unblinking, would scan the forest, as if expecting to see the apparitions behind the voices. The once serene woods had, for her, transformed into a realm of unease and foreboding. This particular evening had been unusually chilly. The moisture in the air was palpable, the sort that sank into bones and made one shiver from deep within. The campfire was more than just a gathering point. It was a beacon of warmth and safety against the growing unease the woods instilled. Tales and songs had been shared to distract from the disconcerting quiet of the forest, with Benjamin playing a soft tune on his makeshift flute. As the mists enveloped their surroundings, weaving their tendrils through the trees and reducing the world to mere silhouettes and sounds, the atmosphere grew dense with anticipation. The fire's light refracted eerily through the mist, turning the campsite into an otherworldly stage set for tales yet untold. Amelia, her voice quivering, was the first to spot them. "Look," she gasped, pointing towards the thickening fog where those luminescent eyes blinked into existence. One by one, more eyes appeared, glowing with an intensity that seemed unnatural. Their iridescent glow was mesmerizing, leaving the settlers rooted to their spots, caught between fascination and terror. Then, from the mists, figures began to materialize. They stood tall, towering above the settlers, their skeletal frames wrapped in a gossamer-like skin that shimmered in the firelight. These were not creatures of flesh and blood. They were ephemeral, made of the mists and ancient magic that the woods had harbored for eons. Their elongated fingers ended in sharp, talon-like nails, and while their faces remained eerily neutral, there was an intelligence in their eyes that betrayed eons of existence. Samuel, ever the voice of reason, tried to muster courage. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice betraying a hint of fear he would have liked to hide. The creatures remained silent, their gaze unwavering. It was as if they were evaluating the intruders, trying to decipher the intentions of these new settlers in their age-old sanctuary. Mary clutched her crucifix tighter, her lips moving in silent prayer, while Benjamin, wide-eyed, clutched his flute, seemingly forgetting how to play. The air grew heavy with tension, filled with a mix of awe and dread, as the settlers and the ancient beings faced off under the canopy of the haunting woods. Captain Ward's boots crunched on the forest floor as he took that brave step forward, separating himself from the huddled group of settlers. Every eye, human and otherwise, fixed on him. The weight of his responsibility as leader pressed heavily on his shoulders, evident in the determined set of his jaw and the furrow in his brow. The campfire flickered, casting intermittent light and shadow on his face, making his steely eyes seem even more intense. "Who are you?" His voice, despite the evident tension, was strong and commanding, demanding an answer. The silence that followed was palpable, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant murmur of the forest. One of the creatures, slightly taller and emanating a faint glow brighter than the others, stepped forward. Its gaze never left Captain Ward's as it responded, "We are the guardians of this land." There was an ageless quality to its voice, a sound that seemed like it was born from the very depths of the earth, from the roots of the trees and the whispers of the wind. "You tread on ancient grounds untouched by time and man." The settlers exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of their intrusion into this sacred space dawning on them. Amelia, her curiosity overcoming her fear, found her voice. "What do you want?" she whispered, her words floating in the air like fragile glass. Another creature, its form shimmering with a blue luminescence, tilted its head slightly, considering Amelia's question. "To warn," it began, its voice a haunting melody that seemed to emanate from the world around them. "Your kind brings change, destruction." Its eyes, deep and knowing, scanned the group. "This land is old, alive. Respect it or face its wrath." Behind Amelia, Mary clutched her crucifix even tighter, murmuring prayers under her breath. Benjamin looked down, his grip on his flute white-knuckled, while Samuel held Mary close, his eyes darting around, searching for an escape route. The message from the Guardians was clear, and the gravity of their expedition took on a deeper, more significant meaning. They weren't just settlers. They were intruders in a world that had its own rules and guardians to enforce them. The following morning, as the sun's rays timidly penetrated the dense canopy, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor, the group huddled together to discuss their next move. Captain Ward, having barely slept, looked weary. Dark circles underlined his eyes, and his usually taut posture sagged, The memories of the previous night weighed heavily on his mind. Samuel, ever robust in his beliefs, was the first to break the silence. Wiping the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, he declared, "Look, we've come too far to be chased away by some illusions or forest spirits." His stout physique and ruddy complexion, coupled with his unwavering determination, made him a force to be reckoned with. Amelia interjected, her voice soft yet firm. "But Samuel, those creatures, they were but mere hallucinations." Samuel cut her off, his voice rising. "Perhaps the result of our exhaustion or the unfamiliar herbs and plants here. We've journeyed for months, sacrificed much to be here. We cannot and will not turn back now." Benjamin, who had been quietly observing, hesitated before adding, I too believe we should stay. We can't let fear dictate our fate, but we must be cautious and respectful of this land." His fiery red hair seemed even brighter in the morning sun, hinting at the underlying courage that had started to kindle within him. Mary nodded, her earlier fear replaced with resolve. "We build, but we do so with care, ensuring we don't upset the balance of this place." Captain Ward sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Very well," he conceded. "We'll establish New Hollow here. But let's ensure we honor the Guardian's warning. This land has been kind to allow us entry. We shall repay that kindness with respect." And so, with a mix of determination and apprehension, the settlers embarked on their mission, building their new life in a place both wondrous and foreboding. The name New Hollow seemed fitting, capturing the essence of their new beginning in this mysterious ancient land. The village's rhythm began to change. Mornings in New Hollow, once filled with the vibrant energy of a budding settlement, became sluggish. The mist, once a thin, mysterious veil, thickened, hanging heavily around the village, almost choking its inhabitants. Instead of dissipating with the sun's rise, it clung to the ground, curling around their ankles as if trying to drag them into its depths. Amelia, who had always been sensitive to her surroundings, started to have restless nights. She would wake up, her sheets drenched in sweat, with visions of the skeletal guardians etched in her mind. The creatures no longer just watched. They seemed to communicate with her, sending waves of sorrow and anger directly into her consciousness. Captain Ward, too, felt the shift. The weight of leadership pressed on him as he tried to maintain morale. He would often find himself staring into the dense forest, trying to glean some understanding of the creatures and their intent. Were they merely protective, or was there something more sinister at play? Samuel and Mary's farm, which initially thrived, started to show signs of decay. Crops withered, and livestock grew sickly. Samuel, usually robust and dismissive, became irritable. He began to mutter about leaving the cursed land, even as he stubbornly tried to cultivate his dying crops. Benjamin, on the other hand, became obsessed with the Guardians. Each night he would venture out, trying to communicate, to understand. His once fiery hair now hung limp, and his eyes held a faraway look, as if he were in constant communion with the ancient beings. The villagers whispered amongst themselves. The promise of New Hollow had been replaced by a palpable dread. Children, who once played without care, now huddled indoors, speaking in hushed tones about the shadow people who came with the mist. The very essence of the settlement seemed to be eroding, giving way to a darkness that was ancient, relentless, and hungry. The guardians of the forest had made their message clear. New Hollow was not just a place. It was a test of mankind's ability to coexist with forces beyond their understanding. Under the unrelenting weight of the forest's ominous presence, the once cohesive group started unraveling. Mary's hysterics became a nightly occurrence. With her hawkish nose now pale and her slender form shivering uncontrollably, she would often be found sitting outside, staring blankly into the mist, murmuring about voices only she could hear. Her lullabies to her children became melancholic chants that spoke of age-old secrets and forgotten pacts. Samuel, desperate to bring back the strong-willed woman he loved, looked on helplessly, the lines on his face deepening with worry and sleepless nights. Benjamin's transformation was even more profound. Gone was the shy, quiet lad. In his place stood a young man with an almost fanatical obsession. He filled parchment after parchment with intricate drawings of the creatures, their skeletal forms twisted in dance or in anger. The edges of the paper were often marked with scribbles, symbols that seemed reminiscent of the ones the creatures bore. He spoke less and less to the humans around him, and more to the forest. Late into the night, he would wander, his fiery red hair now dulled, a mere wisp in the engulfing mist, as he sought communion with the ancient beings. The forest, it seemed, had claimed him. Captain Ward and Amelia watched in anguish as their group, once filled with hope and dreams of a new beginning, disintegrated. Captain Ward's weathered face grew even more lined, his sharp blue eyes constantly darting around, as if expecting an ambush. Amelia's green eyes, once filled with curiosity, now held a haunted look. She often tried to comfort Mary or reach out to Benjamin, but the woods had cast a spell that seemed unbreakable. The campfire, which once symbolized warmth and camaraderie, now served as a meager barrier against the creeping darkness. The settlers, instead of sharing stories of the day, sat in tense silence, each lost in their thoughts, each hearing the siren call of the woods in their own, hauntingly personal way. Captain Ward, seeing the change in the atmosphere, rallied the settlers. "Gather around Amelia," he ordered, his voice firm and commanding despite the terror that gripped his heart. They formed a tight circle around her, with Benjamin, even in his altered state, instinctively moving closer to the source of the light. The mist, once advancing, now recoiled from the golden aura emanating from Amelia's locket. The creatures, too, seemed hesitant, their luminescent eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and caution. Their skeletal forms wavered at the perimeter of the light, their graceful glide disrupted by the unexpected turn of events. Amelia, feeling a newfound strength, stepped forward. "This locket," she began, her voice steady, "has been passed down through generations. It carries the love, hope, and blessings of our ancestors. We mean no harm. We just wish to leave in peace." One of the creatures, perhaps a leader of sorts, glided closer, its form stopping just outside the protective glow. "You have trespassed," it responded, its voice echoing the ancient wisdom of ages. "But we recognize the power you wield, an old magic familiar yet different." Samuel, his portly figure now drenched in sweat, spoke up. "We came seeking a new home, a new start. We never intended to disrespect your land or its spirits. Grant us passage and we will never return." The creatures seemed to communicate among themselves, a silent exchange that made the air even colder. After what felt like hours, the leader spoke again. "You may leave, but remember our warning. This land is old and alive. Do not return, for the consequences will be dire." Captain Ward, seizing the moment, nodded in gratitude. "We understand, we will not forget." With Amelia's glowing locket leading the way, the settlers slowly began their trek out of the engulfing woods. The creatures watched silently, their haunting presence a stark reminder of the settlers' harrowing ordeal. By dawn, New Hollow was far behind them. The mist that had once seemed all-encompassing now lingered only in their memories. But as the sun's first rays touched their weary faces, the settlers knew they had escaped not just a physical location, but also the dark allure of ancient magic that almost claimed their souls. The dense forest gave way to open fields, and as they sprinted across the grassy expanse, the weight of the wood's oppression began to lift. Captain Ward, leading the group, felt the ground beneath his feet change from the soft, damp soil of the forest to the firm, dry land of the meadows. He dared a glance back, witnessing the creatures halt at the very edge of the woods, their ethereal forms shimmering as if they were bound by an unseen barrier. Amelia, clutching the locket close to her heart, felt its warmth pulsating, a rhythmic beat that seemed in tune with her own heart. She remembered tales their grandmother had told them, of protective charms and ancient magics that watched over their lineage. Now, she truly believed them. The locket wasn't just a family heirloom. It was a shield, a guardian in its own right. Samuel and Mary, hand in hand, stumbled occasionally in their haste, but never faltered, their determination fueled by the terror of the night's events. Benjamin, his once vibrant red hair now matted with sweat, ran alongside them, the haunting images he'd drawn now discarded, forgotten in the face of their escape. As the first golden hues of dawn painted the sky, A sense of relief washed over them. The creatures, bound to the shadowy realm of the woods, couldn't follow them into the light. The realization felt like a physical weight lifting off their shoulders. The sun's rays, warm and comforting, felt like nature's own embrace, welcoming them back from the brink. They had ventured into the unknown, faced ancient guardians of a land untouched by time, and had emerged scarred but alive. The horizon before them promised a new day, a new beginning, and the hope that the darkness of the past would remain confined to the memories of a night in the woods. Over time, the land surrounding New Hollow began to gain an eerie reputation. Birds and wildlife seemed to avoid the place, with even the boldest of animals skirting around its borders. The trees at the edge of the woods stood tall and menacing, their branches twisted in grotesque shapes, as if trying to keep intruders out, or perhaps to keep something within. Local tribes spoke of the area with a mix of reverence and fear, sharing legends of the spirits that guarded the heart of the forest. They believed that the very soil of New Hollow was sacred, and that the settlers' intrusion had angered age-old deities that rested beneath its surface. Ceremonies were held at the forest's edge, offerings of peace left in an attempt to appease the restless spirits that were said to haunt its depths. Children grew up hearing the tale of New Hollow, told by crackling fires during cold winter nights. Elders would weave the story with vivid details: the bravery of Captain Ward, the allure of Amelia's glowing locket, and the eerie, bone-chilling stare of the ancient creatures. The legend was a cautionary tale, instilling respect for the mysteries of the land and the spirits that dwelled there. As decades turned to centuries, the legacy of New Hollow became both a ghost story and a historical puzzle. Archaeologists and thrill-seekers alike tried to locate the lost settlement, hoping to unearth its secrets. But the forest, dense and unwelcoming, seemed to shift and change, thwarting any attempts to penetrate its core. And indeed, on some moonlit nights, when the mist was thick and the world was silent, faint cries for help could be heard emanating from the woods. Whispered conversations, the clink of tools, and the soft hum of a lullaby, echoes of the settlers of New Hollow, forever ensnared by the ancient protectors of the land they once hoped to call home.